Live from our 7 Tasmania studios, your nightly news with Joe Palmer begins now.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to 7 Nightly News. Correctional officers have joined a growing list of public sector workers walking off the job, rallying for better pay and work conditions as part of a year-long fight with the government. The protest come as the head of Tasmania's peak union body has stood aside, leading to speculation there's tension arising between union heavyweights.
It's a simple message. Risdon prison staff walking off the job, part of a year-long battle for better pay and conditions. The government saying the protest forced prisons into lockdown.
I dare the Premier and I dare the Treasurer to come and spend a day in our shoes. Come and work here for a day. And in exchange, I'll come and work for them for a day so that we can see what each other are doing.
Outside the Royal Hobart Hospital, allied health staff had a similar request, saying they're underpaid and understaffed.
We have 94 occasions of service per day that we don't get to see in our inpatient areas, and that's an underestimation from the data that we have, and that equates to 14 extra FTE in the acute hospital.
In a statement, the Treasurer threatened that a negotiation meeting planned for Thursday would not go ahead unless all industrial action was stopped.
That absolutely takes a toll on a workforce. And when we're talking about Unions Tasmania and the public sector unions, we're talking about public sector workers.
It comes as the president of Unions Tasmania, Ros Madsen, is departing from the role, but staying on as Education Union Manager, even after surviving a no-confidence motion and backflipping on a wages deal. In a statement saying she remains committed to achieving the best possible outcome in negotiations, colleagues remaining tight-lipped.
I don't want to comment on that.
Ros needs to make decisions about her workload and what she's doing. I'm sure you'd all imagine that negotiating these agreements for 12 months puts a lot of pressure on a lot of leaders amongst unions.
My understanding is that Ros has resigned. That was her decision, and no, I don't think it shows any disunity whatsoever.
Fuelling speculation, there's growing tensions within the union ranks. Michelle Wisby, 7 Tasmania News.
A tragic twist at a crash scene near Port Sorell has resulted in a man's death this morning. His van hit black ice and crashed, but as he waited by the side of the road, another vehicle also lost control and collided into him.
The remains of a devastating collision. This van veered off Frankfurt Road near Port Sorell at around 7 this morning, only to be struck moments later by an oncoming ute.
Lost control on what we believe is a patch of black ice. That vehicle's rolled, and then shortly after that a second vehicle has collided with that vehicle, also sliding on the black ice.
The 56-year-old van driver from Lagana survived the first crash, but tragically died soon after the second incident. A 19-year-old Youngtown man and his passenger in the colliding ute didn't sustain any physical injuries. Tasmania Police says the icy conditions were a contributing factor.
It's a country road, it's shaded by trees. This time of the year it doesn't get a lot of sunlight. The ice is a concern.
This stretch of road contains patches of ice that remain all throughout the day, with dangerous icy conditions contributing to many crashes this time of year all across Tasmania. More minor crashes were reported in other parts of the state due to ice. This vehicle ploughed into a ditch in Taroona, and thankfully the driver walked away unscathed. But authorities are warning all motorists to be cautious.
Be aware of the road conditions, make sure that your vehicle's serviced correctly, and as I say, drive to the conditions.
An investigation into the Harford crash continues. Rebecca Main, 7 Tasmania News.
The jury for the murder trial of Mark Rodney Jones has heard the final closing arguments and will retire to deliberate its verdict tomorrow. The 43-year-old is accused of waterboarding and suffocating 22-year-old Bradley Brouard on New Year's Day in 2017. Our reporter Jessie Gilmore has more.
Following prosecution's closing address yesterday, defence lawyer Greg Richardson spent almost 3 hours today presenting why Mr Jones should be found not guilty of murdering Bradley Brouard. Central to his argument was his client's intention, stating to the jury Mr Jones's motivation for waterboarding and repeatedly holding a plastic bag over the 22-year-old's head was to obtain information regarding his stolen vehicle. He went on to say Mr Jones's whole purpose was to get his car back. Why would he intend to kill the one person who knew where the vehicle was? Prosecutor put to the jury yesterday that Mr Jones should have known his actions would likely result in death. Mr Brewer's body was found at the bottom of Lake Eugeniana in the state's northwest 5 weeks after his death. Justice Robert Pearce reminded the jury that due to this fact, there was no medical evidence connected to the death as the body was decomposed. In summarising the case, Justice Pearce also reminded the jurors to thoroughly consider what caused Mr Brewer's death, stating whether he had or had not stolen Mr Jones's car was irrelevant. The jury will retire to begin deliberating tomorrow morning. It can return one of 3 verdicts: guilty of murder, guilty of manslaughter, or not guilty of any crime.
The Transport Safety Bureau is issuing a warning about pilot fatigue after an investigation into a Tasmanian flight incident. Last November, this Vortex airplane was flying freight from Devonport to King Island, but overflew its destination by 78 kilometres. The ATSB found the pilot hadn't slept for 24 hours, was acutely fatigued and fell asleep during the flight.
The investigation highlights the need for pilots to assess their level of fatigue both before and during a flight. Operators should also consider the risks associated with allowing a pilot to continue to operate following a fatigue-related event.
Concerningly, the pilot continued his shift, flying back to Melbourne, despite reporting the incident to Air Traffic Control and a supervisor. Hobart's Derwent Entertainment Centre and Wilkinsons Point precinct are set for a massive makeover, with NBL owner Larry Kesselman poised to buy the asset from the Glenorchy City Council. And it could mean big things for the state's hopes of having its own NBL side.
For months, Kesselman has been in discreet discussions with the Glenorchy City Council, and last night things took a massive leap forward as Council voted unanimously to enter into an exclusive 120-day negotiation period with the NBL's owner.
Look, we're certainly excited to see this proposal lift off. You know, Council's been talking about development on Wilkinsons Point for well over a decade now.
The founder of internet service provider Dodo is no stranger to property development either, with his current projects including the $500 million Capital Grand apartment tower in Melbourne's South Yarra. And with an estimated wealth of around $750 million, Council is more than confident Kesselman will deliver something special for the deck after he presented a $150 to $200 million vision for the precinct.
It would include an entertainment precinct, sport and recreation facilities, hotel accommodation, retail, food and beverage, and also importantly public open space.
And ideally a Tasmanian NBL side down the track, with last night's vote following a failed bid from the owners of the Southern Huskies basketball franchise to purchase the asset last October, which was labelled by Council at the time as totally inadequate.
Need for the community to get a good return on this particular site in terms of financial return, but also in terms of public amenity, and that certainly wasn't the proposition we had before us when we considered the Huskies proposal. So it's a very different kettle of fish we're dealing with this time round.
Kesselman is set to reveal more about his plans for a Tasmanian NBL side tomorrow, including who would potentially take ownership of the franchise. The state government issuing a statement today saying it supports the push for an NBL licence and will be meeting with Kesselman and Council next week to discuss the proposal. Tom Cooper, 7 Tasmanian News.
An examination of recent changes to the state's gender laws has found they are legally sound, despite some issues remaining unresolved. The Law Reform Institute today launching a paper into new legislation allowing gender to be taken off birth certificates. Finding there's still work to do to assist the intersex community, but saying many other concerns raised were unfounded.
It will create more certainty for sections of our community, and the effect on, the rest of the community will be relatively minimal. So in that respect, it's fairly good law.
Now calling for community feedback on the paper. In a thought-provoking new art exhibition, inmates from Risdon Prison have shared their own experiences of forgiveness. The Art from Inside show opened tonight, giving inmates the opportunity to share about their own journeys. The exhibition featuring everything from paintings to drawing and sculpture. The art on display will be judged and prizes awarded, with many of the works up for sale. The free exhibition at Hobart's Waterside Pavilion will be open to the public until Sunday.
To hockey, and OHA are back on track to claim an incredible 5 Premier League premierships in a row after a dominant 4-1 win over ladder leaders Derwent last weekend to see the side climb up to 3rd spot on the competition ladder ahead of this Saturday's clash with 4th placed University.
Mindset in the group to say, okay, let's really make a run at this and make sure that we're putting in the work and make sure that we're doing all the right things.
The weekend's match will also mark the club's 100th year. Despite limited experience behind the wheel, a Tasmanian rally driver has done the state proud, holding his own against the best of the best. And with the need for speed ingrained in his blood, Tim Orty is keen to continue making a name for himself in the sport. Tim Orty speaks about his Mazda GTR like it's a member of the family.
We've got a good personality. It's not boring in any respect.
With his father and uncle competing in the state's rally circuit in the 70s, Tim was keen to give it a crack. And after rebuilding the old 323 from scratch, he got his first taste of off-road racing in last year's Tasmanian Rally Championships, only narrowly missing out on a win.
None of this going around in circles on racetracks or anything like that. Let's go out in the bush.
Probably looks pretty wild from the outside, but Tim just likes to put on a show for the spectators.
Confident they could shift things up another gear, the pair entered into last weekend's Australian Rally Championships in Launceston, pitting themselves up against the country's best drivers. And the Tassie underdogs surprised even themselves by finishing up just shy of a podium finish on the timesheets in 5th place.
Obviously didn't expect to do that well in the ARC, I think, but you know, you can't count someone like this out. He's just once in a lifetime driver, and he's really, really good.
Tempted to take his pride and joy to compete on the mainland eventually, for now Tim is content with racing in his home state and is confident he can shake things up again in 2020.
It's all about that challenge, and yeah, to be able to match times with people using cars worth 5 times, 6 times as much is, yeah, it's a great feeling.
Good evening. The sheep were shivering in the Fingal Valley this morning, a very frosty -7 the low. All overnight temperatures below average across the state. Hobart 0 to 10 today, a top of 13 for the northern centres. Friendly Beach is the high with 16. Butler's Gorge a -7 overnight. Lake Leak and Melton Mowbray -6. Ross Grove, Ouse and Lyowini all -5. Ouse did reach a top of 2 as the day warmed up. Most of the maximum temperatures into the low to mid-teens. Mostly clear conditions today, however some clouds sat over the northwest before a drift elsewhere across the state later in the day. Mid to high cloud obscures most of New South Wales and parts of southern Queensland. Patchy cloud over the west of the nation, with other areas clear. Tomorrow, the high shifts over the Tasman Sea, directing a more north-northwesterly airstream over us. A cold front and trough cross Western Australia, and several troughs remain over Queensland. Winds from the north at around 10 to 20 knots and to 25 knots down the west coast tomorrow. Light winds inland up to around 15 knots. 12 the high and a sunny day for Hobart. 12 the top for Geefton as well after a morning frost. -2 to kick the day off in Bothwell. 11 the top. 12 for Launceston. Bit of fog about to start things off. 13 for Devonport and Cressy a high of 10. Burnie tomorrow can expect a partly cloudy 13 degrees, partly cloudy for Strawn as well, and Curry on 14. St Helens tomorrow 15 degrees and sunny. Swansea the same, and 12 the top for Orford. On Thursday, local morning fog and frost, fine and sunny over the east, partly cloudy over the remainder. Showers over the west and north from late morning on Friday, increasing to rain later. And on Saturday, a bit of wet weather across the state, rain heavier over the north and west. Showers and a possible storm for Perth, sunny in Adelaide and Melbourne, showers for Sydney and Brisbane tomorrow. A little cloud around, 7 degrees in Hobart, 8 right now in Launceston, Devonport 8 degrees. And tonight's energy saving tip from the staff at Aurora Energy. Did you know the most efficient setting for heat pumps is between 18 and 21 degrees? Actually, Joe, I had a knock at the door the other day. The company that installed my heat pump wanted me to pay for it. I didn't understand. I'm sure they told me the heat pump would pay for itself in 3 years.
Yes, we've all been told that. Thank you, Merv. That's all from the news team for now. Have a lovely evening. We'll see you with updates a bit later. Bye-bye.